started. So thank you everyone for joining today. So we're talking about HYCU Our Cloud Hybrid Cloud Edition, release 5.3, and it's here. It's available now. It went GA a few weeks back. So if you haven't, planned your upgrades into that yet, think about when you're going to plan those upgrades in, and I'm hopefully going to give you a sneak peek of the things that landed with that, and some of the advantages and some of the features, functions, and outcomes you're going to be able to receive once you've upgraded to that. So my name is Chris Rogers. I'm a product marketing manager here at HYCU, and I look after all of our on-premises systems. So Nutanix is obviously the main one, but also our VMware platforms, the hypervisors, and also file shares and databases, applications, those types of things. So anything that's kind of on-prem on tin, I look after from a product point of view. So we did a brief housekeeping. So for those of you who joined a little bit later, everyone's on mute. Unfortunately, we can't unmute you. Please ask questions in the Q&A, and yes, you'll receive a copy of the slides and the recording into your inbox in a few minutes, or so a few hours time afterwards. So hopefully by tomorrow you'll all have that in your inbox. So what we're going to walk away with today, what's on the agenda for us today? So the first one is the cyber resilience concept. So complete coverage across any hypervisor you run in your estate. You can decide what gets scanned and how deep that scan is, and verify a backup's clean, and then scale to finish the scanning fast. And then the second one is scalability. So we're going to talk about the HYCU Manager and how you can manage your wider HYCU estate easier. And then flexibility and security. Choosing where your backups live. Making sure that we harden HYCU as best possible and as easy as possible. And then with the mutability on top of that as well. So we're going to talk about cyber resilience and cyber kind of use cases to start with. I think this is kind of in an ongoing theme of backup and recovery and cyber resilience for quite a few years now. And we're just continuing to build momentum and continue to build upon the feature set we have inside of HYCU around this topic. It's very rarely I go and talk to a customer. Maybe some of you have spoken to me on the call before, or a customer, or a partner, or a prospect, or an industry leader, whoever it might be, especially around cyber resilience. When we don't talk about ransomware, we don't talk about the role that backup and recovery plays in the wider cybersecurity picture. So knowing your backups are clean, knowing they're restoring data that isn't going to have a reinfection loop, all that's critical. And also now across more hypervisors than ever before as well. So again, if you were on 5.2 or 5.1 in previous releases, you'd have had things like Nutanix AHV, and then we've added files and Dell file systems and Azure VMs and EC2 VMs to that list. And then 5.3, we're releasing it for VMware vSphere, Azure Local, and Microsoft Hyper-V as well. So pretty much you're going to get the same standard of threat hunting across all the hypervisors and all the files in your environment that are supported. That means it's really, really nice if you're running a multi-hypervisor estate. Maybe you're in that transition. You're thinking, I'm on vSphere now, and I'm going to be moving to Nutanix, or I want optionality and moving to alternative hypervisors in the future. That you can bring HYCU with you on that journey, and you're going to get the same first-class experience across all of those hypervisor estates as well, giving you that complete coverage across that estate, and also running the same workflows over again. Let's say you've got Nutanix AHV, plus you've got Nutanix files, plus you've got some legacy vSphere or some vSphere that you're going to migrate or keep in house. You're going to get the same experience from HYCU across all of those hypervisors and file shares. So we're going to do the same methodology for scanning. You're going to see the same alerting, the same reporting. So you kind of get familiar with the scanning in your environment. So you're not having to look at different places for different tools and try and patchwork something together that looks completely different every time you look at it. So that's what we're trying to bring, the same scan, the same policies, the same verdict, whatever you're running underneath the hood, the HYCU is going to abstract that up and show you just a nice view of, okay, this backup's been successful. There's no anomalies in it, and we haven't found any malicious content inside of those backups as well. Or on the contrary to that, we've done the backup has been successful, but there is anomalies in that backup. And we've also found malicious content, and then what we're going to do about it afterwards, right? And that's where our kind of the next features come into play, which is I've kind of built this as a workflow, right? So there's four different kind of features, functionality that are built into this workflow, but they kind of build a bigger story out rather than just being point solutions. We've thought about how we release features, functions, and outcomes for customers and deliver on what we've been asked by our customer base. So The first one obviously is what we've just spoken about, that complete coverage, right? So no matter what you're running, you can then protect all your workloads and get that scanning capacity. There's no blind spots being left by HYCU anymore. And then we can choose what happens to the backups, right? So we could do anomaly detection only, and we could do malware scanning only, or we could do both on every backup. And that's a choice that customers can make on their own. It's inside of the policies, inside of where they're doing data protection today. So you get to just choose, for maybe some dev test workloads that are really isolated that, you're not that fussed about. You could do just anomaly detection. Or you could do just malware scanning and actually you decide that you've got something else for anomaly detection in your environment. You're going to use HYCU just for the malware scanning piece of that. You get that complete flexibility and you can then make that decision. Most customers are going to have both because more coverage is better, but we've given people the opportunity to choose which workloads and which scanning methodology is applicable to each one of those. So that second step is then control. And then you work on the next one, which is verify, right? So we're able to now hunt on demand. So previously, what we were doing is, and actually what we still do today, is we take a backup, it goes to your immutable store, wherever that may be, and we're going to come on to some of those options later on. You pass it into your immutable store, and then once it's done, we then scan the backup and say, yes, it's fine. The piece that was missing, and a lot of customers have mentioned that, and we've reacted relatively quickly to this, is I want to go back and rescan those backups, right? So not just at the point that they've been backed up, but maybe in a week's time, or maybe after something's triggered my cyber team to tell me that something's gone wrong. After someone asked me to restore data, I want to go back and rescan that particular restore point, or rescan a few VMs, whatever it may be, maybe with updated rules or updated YARA rules. Then you can kind of get another clean view. You can rescan on demand, giving you the kind of the most confidence you can that your backups are clean because they've been scanned, maybe moments just before you're actually going to recover data back into production environment. And the last piece is then accelerate, right? Scale that to finish that fast. So with our new architecture, the HYCU instances that we use today to do, file share backup, and if you use VMware, maybe you're using to do backup and recovery today as well. Those same instances, we've now added the ability to do scanning from. So you have your main controller, and then we can scale out these instances to essentially capacitate and give you more capacity to scan faster, right? So we have that scale out. So let's say in a hypothetical scenario, your cyber team, your red team, or whoever else is responsible for cyber resilience and cybersecurity in your organization. Let's say they flagged something and say, by the way, we think something's gone wrong in this environment. We understand the impact to be this. These 20 VMs, could you go and rescan them and make sure HYCU hasn't missed anything, right? And you go, I can do, but typically we only scan one VM or 5 VMs at a time. So it's going to take a little while for us to scan those VMs and get back to you. What you could do now is go, yeah, no problem. We'll deploy, 10 instances in the environment, get those 20 machines all queued and scanning at the same time, increasing that power and that capacity to scan, get the results back and say, yep, we've confirmed they're clean. We think we can go ahead and restore data back into production without risk. And the team say, great, let's do that. Let's go and do that. And then what we can do is we can then just scale those back down again. So you can remove the instances from the environment and go back to kind of like what I call business as usual scale, right? Where things are just ticking along and going there. So it gives you that kind of elasticity to be able to introduce instances when you want more capacity and reduce them back when you don't need that in your environment as well. So hopefully that kind of gives the ability for you to do that full verification all the way from from conceptually backing up your VMware, Azure Local, Hyper-V, AHV files. Now all of those things can get backed up. You choose what you're going to be scanning at what depth. You can then obviously automatically scan them as the backups are happening in BAU, and then you go on that hunt on demand, and then you scale if you need to as well. And the scale doesn't just have to be reactive. You could put it into your environment. If you've got excess compute or you've got the capacity in your environment to do that, you could have the instances running all the time and just get that scanning done as quickly as possible after the backup's completed. Completely down to how you want to architect and how you want to kind of bring that architecture to life. We're giving flexibility to customers. And then moving on from there, compliance, securities, hardening, all those things are something that are kind of necessary in today's world, going back to kind of that cyber resilience conversation, right? We know that backups and backup targets are kind of like the number one target for ransomware gangs out there, right? If they can get in and infiltrate the backups, they know you haven't got a way out, so the chance of payment is heavily increased if they can get hold of the backup software or the target and delete data or make it unrecoverable. That's why at HYCU, that some of you may know that we have a DISA STIG. So it's the kind of if you don't know what a DISA STIG is, and I didn't before I joined HYCU, because we don't know what DISA really means and what the STIG is in Europe mainly. It's the US department's, but the Department of Defense is kind of hardening checklist. It's the one of the toughest security barriers to pass. In terms of making your software as secure as you possibly can. Normally takes loads of manual effort, loads of kind of um, going through individual configs and individual files and making sure we've locked things down in a certain way to meet the requirements that the DISA STIG means. What essentially we've done now is make that, one click of a button. We run one command inside the command line, and essentially you can then have that full hardening locked down to DISA STIG standards, without the months or the weeks of manual effort to go through. So what does that kind of mean, right? The bar's going to be the same for most organizations, right? Maybe it's slightly less than the DISA STIG standard, right? But it's still going to go through the same processes, right? We're still going to want to hit the same levels of hardening available, because why wouldn't we harden things as much as we possibly can, right? It's going to, increase our resilience overall and hopefully make sure no one can ever get into anything. So even if you are in a commercial segment, so banks, hospitals, finance, manufacturing, all those things, whether maybe you're not a federal customer, but you're still going to want to meet federal requirements, right? Because why wouldn't you, right? This allows you to do that seamlessly without kind of as I said, the kind of the labor of love of going through config files and locking things down manually. We've kind of automated that for you guys to make it simpler, easier to do, and kind of hit those regulatory requirements if you do have them, without the weeks of ongoing there. I can see some questions. Great, thank you. Put them in the chat. We'll definitely get to them at the end. So I know we've only got half an hour scheduled today, so I'm going to try and get through so we could do a little bit of a demo, just so I can show you the new interface of certain components of 5.3. So bear with me. I'm going relatively quick, but honestly, want to make sure people actually get to see it if we possibly can. So the next one's scale, right? So run your entire estate as one. Now we've introduced the HYCU Manager. Some of you may have used the HYCU Manager in previous forms. We've improved the capability, right? So every controller, one view, right? So we can go into the HYCU Manager now and see the health, the job, the statuses of the whole estate on one screen. So if you're running multi-controller environments, which I'd imagine a large proportion on the call are, because maybe there's scale or there's different geographical sites or whatever reason you have for running multiple controllers, now you get that single view, and you can also click through that view and get into the controllers for one click as well. The biggest one for me was we can now upgrade all of those controllers at once. So through the HYCU Manager, you can send a single command across to all of the connected controllers in your environment, and suddenly you can upgrade everything at once without having the laborious task of going through, downloading the package, uploading it, clicking next, done, etc. Whatever whatever the upgrade process was, depending on what version you're happening. It wasn't particularly cumbersome, but imagine if you're running 50 controllers, right? You've got to do the same thing 50 times. It becomes a bit of a pain and a bit of a long task. Whereas now you can come into the HYCU Manager, suspend all the controllers' actions, and push an update to everyone. And that means you're never going to be anything left behind, right? So from the manager, you'll be able to push out that update and make sure everything's running on the same version. That interoperability is going to be better. Everything's going to be uniform across the board, rather than, oh, we missed the Tokyo controller because it was in a different time zone. No one thought about scheduling the maintenance. We'll come back in a couple of weeks and mop that up, and it never gets done. And then we raise a support case because something isn't working. We say, oh, we haven't upgraded to 5.3 because we missed it, right? So those things can get overlooked, right? I've been a sysadmin for my sins a little while back in my career now, and those things happen. We're only human at the end of the day. Things do get missed, but hopefully we're trying to minimize that possibility, but also maximize the time spent. Well, sorry, minimize the time spent actually doing upgrades, and pushing it from a single place is the easiest way to do that. And then, as I said before, you've got one single login now as well. So you can log into the HYCU Manager and you have see a list of all the controllers you've got there. If you want to go and dig a bit deeper into something, maybe into a setting or a policy or a target or something like that, then you can click on the controller and we're going to single sign on you through straight to that controller. So you haven't got to go and find the URL and log in, then repeat your login steps again. We're going to pass authentication straight through. So just bring that up into a new tab for you. And then we also have the ability to have one report. So one report covering the whole of the estate, exactly what, yeah, as it's on the screen, exactly what your auditor needs, right? So here's all the controllers, here's all the jobs, here's all the status, fully exported for you to be able to read and amend and do whatever you need to do to that to pass on to third parties or up the chain, to over C-level or board level, depending on what reporting requirements you do have as well. One of the biggest ones for me is the faster restores. Looking at the way we can minimize kind of manual effort, and you'll see through a lot of this, through a lot of the kind of themes we've done in this release, is a lot of it is about reducing, the burden on you guys. You guys are actually looking after Haiku and using it on a daily basis, trying to reduce those manual tasks, reduce those repetitiveness of those tasks. So the first thing we're going to introduce into our file systems backup. So I'll make sure this is clear. This is only for the file system restores. So for file servers, Nutanix files, Dell files, NetApp, those types of things. We have the ability to now exclude using glob stack. You can exclude whole files, whole folders. You can exclude certain file types depending on what you want, wildcard matches, those types of things. So making sure we don't waste backup capacity and target capacity backing up things you're never ever going to restore, right? So maybe we don't want to restore any MP3s because someone's loaded up their Spotify playlists inside of there or their iTunes. They've downloaded their iTunes playlist, right, onto the file share. So we can make sure we leave out all those files. So what does that mean? It's going to get quicker backups, potentially faster restores. We're not searching through things we're never ever going to restore. So the index is faster, the restore's faster, the backup's faster. And then secondly, we can then search. So across a file share, we can now search every single restore point and use wildcards to search in there. So maybe we don't know the exact restore point we want to restore the data from because a user said, I had this file called, chris.txt. I had it last week, but for some reason I can't find it now, right? So from you as an IT admin point of view, you're going back going, well, I'll just find one last week and hopefully that'll be fine, right? What happens then is you restore the file. They said, oh, this isn't the latest version. I definitely had one later than this. Then you have to kind of repeat the process until you find the one that you can go through. Now we can then search for that chris.txt inside of Haiku, and it'll show every single restore point that we have available for that, and then you can just add that to your cart and then restore the data, right? So as the next step here, we've got one file, one basket. But now you can also add multiple files to one restore basket or shopping cart, whatever it might be. So you can collect files from different restore points and from different files all together, put them into the basket, and then choose how you restore those afterwards, right? So you don't have to go through the same process to restore 5 files. You go through the process once, choose the files you want to recover, and then choose what you're going to do with them after that as well. And then what that means is we're going to get things done quicker for everybody, right? So rather than having to go through 5 different processes, 5 different files, we essentially do it once and make it as easy as possible. So hopefully we're getting back, back in minutes rather than, potentially an afternoon was, imagine we've got 20, 30, 50 files to try and find from restore. All that's going to be, in a seamless manner rather than that continuous repetitive process. What are we doing for time? 20. Cool. So a broader storage choice. We at Haiku have a very, very big compatibility list in terms of what we support for sources and targets. We've expanded that again today. So we've already covered Nutanix files, objects, Dell files, NetApp, generic files, NFS, SMB, and also S3 compatible. And we've added in Dell PowerScale 1FS as an object source as well. So any customers who are running this will be able to add that in, and we kind of tap into their APIs and get the information from there to be able to kind of do quicker backups and all those types of things as well. So very similar to our integration with like Nutanix files and Nutanix objects, those type Dell files, etc. So anyone who's running that, we can now integrate at even deeper level as well. And the way you want to store your data, again, added some of the biggest names in the storage world here to our compatibility list. So MinIO, if anyone doesn't know what MinIO is, probably the biggest on-prem object storage vendor in the world. A lot of the other vendors use them as their actual object storage libraries, so incredibly popular out there. TrueNAS, again, if you don't know who TrueNAS are, a lot of the a lot of the world runs on TrueNAS under the hood, so a massive storage vendor there. Pure Storage, FlashBlade, with the obvious links to Nutanix and Pure as coming and have been there for a little while now. We've worked with Pure to get that validated for you. So if you are running Nutanix and Pure or just Nutanix, you can store your data on your HYCU backups on Pure. The same with Vast and also Zadara as well, which is an up and coming storage platform as well. So lots more choice, and again, all these support full immutability. So wherever you land your data, it's always going to be immutable as well. So let's see 5.3 at work, and then we'll come back to some questions in a sec. So I know I've only got maybe 3 or 4 minutes. I'll try and show you the biggest things that I think are important. So bear with me and let's switch screens. Good, it hasn't logged me out. So this is 5.3 in all of its glory. So you can see straight away we've slightly changed the interface. So we've got our RShield component at the top here now, which is showing virtual machines, volume groups, and shares, and their statuses as well. So from a initial login, we can already see what's suspicious and what's been scanned, how much of our data estate has been scanned as well. And then we simply click on something. So if you go, follow your virtual machines round, we've got 27 are okay, and then we've got 17 marked as suspicious. If we click on suspicious, we're automatically going to filter that into your VMs list and see only the ones that are suspicious as well. And then you can hover over all of these and see what's happened inside of the environment as well. And then again, as always, we can then see what's happened. We've scanned new and modified files. We found these this ransomware called Held Down. We found that in the backup, so maybe we should do something about that, right? And then if we go into here as well, we've also added the ability, not the ability, kind of, we're going to raise a warning. So if we try and recover this VM, we get a nice suspicious, right? This means it kind of breaks the flow. Imagine at 3 a.m., you've been using HYCU for 5 years, you know exactly how to restore data. You can probably do it in your sleep without the mouse, right? Suddenly we're going to throw up this, which is outside the workflow you're typically used to. That's because we've marked it as suspicious. We've marked it for a reason. So the only way to go through with this is to click continue and say you accept that there might be a risk associated to this, right? So this allows that kind of break in routine and that really kind of vibrant point to say, by the way, if you haven't cleared this status yet and you haven't looked at it, maybe you should do that before you do that. And that goes back to kind of rescanning and doing those bits and pieces as well. So just kind of like that break glass point to physically have to click continue before the restore workflow carries on. So not just in the normal routine of how you would normally do BAU restores, but if it's marked as a suspicious in HYCU, we're going to kind of throw that up and make it obvious that it is red in case you haven't seen all the big red bits elsewhere. The next piece I'll show you is the files search, because I think it really is completely different to what people are used to here, right? So we can come into here and go, let's just do star.star, because I can't remember exactly what's in this file share, but you can then search for them. And then you can see we've got all these files and the latest version of all those files, the time it was last modified, the size of the file, and everything else. So we can just go in and add all of these files. We found them really quickly. We come in, add them to the cart, we click next, and we decide what we're going to do with all those files, right? So restore to the share bucket, restore to the external share, or download them locally as well. And each one can have a different search as well. So you can search for different files and add them to the cart, go back, do a new search and add them to the cart or the basket, and away you go. So kind of freeing up that time, not having to go back and re-index, go through and manually try and click through and find things, that full searchability across the restore points as well. And essentially you just choose which restore point you want to be the first restore point you choose from. So 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be the most recent. But if you know the customer didn't have the data before, July, you can click the latest point you got in July and search, and it's only going to search there backwards. So it searches from that restore point and any restore point we've got before that as well. So again, you can minimize the amount of data you're searching if you know that the customer didn't have the data this month, right? You can kind of go back and research that. But again, most times customers are just going to choose the latest one and search everything just in case they've missed that as well. I think that's probably all we have time for in terms of demo, because I want to make sure we've got a lot of questions. So I want to make sure we get to some questions. So let me just bring back my presentation. Perfect. So what can we start doing today, right? So the cyber resiliency piece, make sure you're utilizing your R Shield capability if you have that available to you. If you don't have it in your licensing, speak to your account management team. They'll definitely want to get that sorted for you because I think it's a real big um, a big piece of the cyber resilience puzzle that most people are trying to solve for today, and if not already solving for there. If you're running multi-controller environments, talk to your account team and your customer success engineers around the HYCU Manager and how you can integrate that into your architecture and the advantage it would give you. And if you are looking at changing storage vendors or anything else there, look at the compatibility list, and then you'll be able to see what is and isn't supported from the wide range we have, so we can help you potentially look at where your next move could be, as whether that's cloud, back on premise, or a mix. So if you do have any questions after today, again, my name is Chris Rogers, so chris.rogers@hyku.com. You can get directly to me, and I can obviously put you in touch with your account team if need be. One last thing to mention, hopefully in the chat or the QA, one of those boxes there will be a G2 link for reviews. Um, if you are a happy customer of HYCU, could you please leave a G2 review for us? Right, it's an incentivized link that you're going to click through. So $25 gift card direct to you as long as it's been approved by G2. But it really does help us kind of get our name out there, get us, up those rankings and win those awards and kind of helps everyone drive a better HYCU experience. The more customers we have, the more investment we have, the better product we get. So it really does help us if you can leave a review on G2 as well. So I appreciate everyone's time, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, everybody.